Hi, everyone. I'm Lilia Perez. I'm the grants manager for Arts Mid-Hudson. We're here today to discuss our Arts and Culture Project Grant Program. As I said, I'm Lilia Perez. I'm the grants manager for Arts Mid-Hudson. Also on our grants team is Vanessa Capuccio-Bear, our grants associate. You can reach both of us at grants@artsmidhudson.org or at 845-454-3222, extension 11. And we're here today to talk about our brand new Arts and Culture Project Grant Program, which is going to administer a great deal of funding in the Mid-Hudson region, Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties this year in 2024, and for projects occurring in 24 and 25. Arts Mid-Hudson really takes accommodation and accessibility seriously. So if there are any accommodations that we can provide to facilitate your participation, please contact us and let us know exactly what you need. We will tailor our services to your needs specifically. These might include translation services for grant assistance, large text documents, specific technical support on applications or grant support, which I'll talk a bit about. Closed captioning is available. This session is being recorded. I think that's a reminder to make sure all of you watching today are have your closed captioning settings turned on if you need that, and or if you're watching on YouTube, that you turn on those settings as well. As I said, we offer an extensive amount of grant assistance, which includes discussing specific questions associated with the parameters of this grant opportunity, brainstorming ideas, and receiving feedback on your draft, meaning your narrative written draft or your draft of your budget. You can make an appointment at the link artsmidhudson.youcanbook.me. You'll also, anytime you receive an email from grants@artsmidhudson.org or you receive an email from us, you'll find that link in our email signature. So you're always able to find that if you received an email from us and we've responded to you. It's also linked on our website. Again, free and varied assistance is available. We love to help review drafts and give feedback. It's honestly my favorite part of the job is looking in depth at your artists' ideas and arts workers' ideas and helping them compile that into a really strong grant proposal. We also do a lot of networking on those calls. So we might listen to what you're trying to do and then make some recommendations around partners you could work with, other artists you could work with. So it's a good way just to kind of, take the benefit of how many people we speak to on a daily basis and help you identify some potential connections. And of course, free draft review, which I'll talk about in a bit. Well, actually, maybe I'll just note it here. If you would like review of your draft, the best way to start that is just to email grants@artsmidhudson.org and say, hi, I am working on the application on Submittable, which is our grant platform. Or I have a Google Doc or Word doc that I can share with you right now if you're able to do some draft review. Once you put in the request to us, then we'll ask you to go ahead and make an appointment on our form or find a time that works for you if you don't see an available time on the booking calendar. There are a few additional, if you've ever gotten draft review from us before, Submittable has actually expanded our access to drafts in progress. So we may be able to just look at it on Submittable, but if you've been working off of Submittable and want to have us review a Google Doc or a Word doc, we can also do it that way. Of course, you can always just copy and paste what you're working on to a body of an email, and we can see it that way too. As I said before, we offer Zoom Q&A sessions. These are not info sessions. These are sessions where it's just an informal setting. We're all in a Zoom room together, and you can ask any questions that you have about the process, about the grant parameters, and any technical assistance issues you might have or needs you might have. It's also a really good way just to hear questions from other applicants, things that you may not have thought to ask, and you can hear it from somebody else. You can see the full schedule of Q&A sessions on our website on the page that has all of the information for Arts and Culture Project grants. And if you're here today for the info session, you'll already get reminders for all of those Q&A sessions. And if you have signed up, you'll continue to get reminders. You don't need to tell us which ones you're attending. You can attend one of them. You can attend all of them. It's totally up to you and your time and needs. Just please RSVP on the appropriate form so that you receive the Zoom access information. And then you'll, again, as I said, receive weekly updates. So today in this info session, we're going to go over the purpose of the Arts and Culture Project Grant Program, important dates and key details. I'll go in depth on the grant parameters, give some information and tips about submitting a grant proposal, and just some general tips about grant writing. All right, so let's talk about the purpose of this program to start. We are so grateful to be able to do this program this year. It is a new program that is made possible with funds from the New York State Legislature and will be administered by us, Arts Mid-Hudson. We have over $500,000 to administer in this program, which, just for context, our statewide community regrants program that we just administered for 2024, we had roughly half of that to administer. So for that reason, you'll notice the grant request amount is a bit higher for this program, and it's expanded in a number of ways in terms of what we can fund, in really exciting ways, we think, that are kind of things that have been popular requests of previous applicants and grantees. We'll be administering this funding for Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. So I'll talk about the overall goals for this program. First of all, as is the case for any of our grants programs, we're trying to make quality arts programming available to all residents in our region. And so we know that by investing in artists, in arts and cultural organizations, they put on programming, produce work that has a ripple effect on the community that we live in. We want to support Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County artists in the creation of new work. We want to support collaborative projects. This is a first for us. Typically for our creation grants, where you might be applying to us to create new work, it's for one individual artist. This can be for a collaboration, for a collective of artists. It's really up to you how you want to structure it. I'll get into the details of how you actually put in the application for collaborations and collectives, but they are eligible. Support the cultural expression of our area's diverse communities and support Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ+, and disabled artists. Support arts and cultural organizers from these groups who are leading this work. So this is really an invitation to any artists who feel their point of view is not explored enough in our region and are thinking of applying to this. We welcome applications from all artists in our region and are particularly interested in uplifting marginalized voices. And support for programming which engages underserved populations, which may have limited access to arts and cultural programming. I'll talk about in depth what we mean by underserved populations, which I'll say for the purpose of this presentation and our materials is a catch-all kind of like broad generalizing term, not a, in my opinion, not an ideal term, but it's really a way for us to communicate how broadly we think about underserved audiences. There are many different types of identities that exist and may can be underserved by arts and cultural programming or not see their point of view explored enough in our region's arts and cultural programming. And so we're really interested in supporting projects that have a strong, well-considered plan to serve groups that don't have enough access to arts and cultural programming. And that doesn't mean we're expecting every group to really serve each specific group and then the intersections of those groups' needs. We're really hoping that applicants will identify specific groups that they think they can actually have an impact in supporting, especially if they are a part of that group themselves. And just some general notes about our programs in general. We administer other grants programs in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. We are focused on centering artists, arts groups, and arts organizations. We're focused on centering underrepresented artists, arts workers, and audiences, including Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, and or disabled individuals. And I'll talk about some other identifiers we recognize as part of underserved groups later on. And all of our grant decisions are made by peer panel review. No Arts Mid-Hudson staff or board has a vote in the peer panel process. We facilitate the process, we have a voice, but we do not have a vote. And so these are made up of community members who read all of the applications and then make a funding recommendation. This is a new program, so obviously all the panelists will be new for this, but you should know for all of our grants programs, panels change every year intentionally so that there is always new voices, new perspectives, new walks of life on the panel. And it's not just the same group handing down very similar decisions year after year. Okay, so now I'm going to go in depth on what this program can fund. And I'll start off by saying, if you're familiar with our statewide community regrants program, which we administer on behalf of the New York State Council on the Arts, This is quite similar to that program. And if you're familiar with it, you'll know that there are 3 distinct categories within it. If you're familiar with that program, I'd like you to think about this as all of those categories just being eligible in one application form. And y'all get in depth on that in a bit, but we're supporting public arts events, creation of new work, in-school workshops, which is separated out in the statewide community re-grant program. And really there are lines between them in terms of like not crossover between those 2 types of projects or 3 types of projects. For this, all of that is eligible, and it's kind of you telling us what are you thinking about doing and checking off all that apply. So I'll talk about that, and I'll also show you how that works on the application. Important dates, really the most important date is the deadline, which is Thursday, August 1st, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. So very specific. It will close end of day on Thursday, August 1st. All funded activities must occur between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. So really the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. As you can see, their funding notification will be given in September of this year. So there's at least 2 months, 2.5 months of time where it's eligible for you to apply for a project occurring in July of this year or August of this year. But you won't know if you receive funding until September. So I'd like you to all factor that into your decision around if you want to apply for something occurring during that period of time or not, or save it for something occurring later on in the funding period. If you are applying for something that is in July, August, September of this year, you're going to be tasked with really presenting that this is very likely to happen, and really showing that this is not something you're aspiring towards. It's something that is really happening and all of the details are in place and you just need additional funding to support XYZ. Okay, so as I'll say many times, this program is new in 2024. We've never done it before. We don't know exactly what the panels are going to gravitate towards, what they're going to be interested in funding. But I can tell you that there is always an interest in supporting new projects, supporting artists and expanding their work, and generating new, engaging new programming that will bring in those who don't typically engage with arts and cultural programming. The focus in terms of what we can fund, eligible arts and cultural activities include but aren't limited to the creation of new work, exhibitions, workshops, performances, festivals, screenings, virtual programming, and public programming for which the central focus is the arts, and any combination of those. Funding amount, applicants may request between $1,000 and $8,000 in increments of 1,000. So that means you could request 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, etc. You cannot request 2,500 or $3,333 and 33 cents. It's increments of 1,000. And if awarded, applicants will receive no less than 70% of their request amount. Basically, those requesting higher amounts might get dropped. If you request 8,000, you could get dropped down to 7,000 or 6,000. If you requested 1,000, for example, they're either going to give you the award or they're not. We're not going to give anything lower than 1,000. There is no cash match required. So if you're applying for $8,000 and that's the entire budget for the project, that is perfectly eligible. I will say, and you'll hear me say this throughout the info session today, I say it to applicants all the time, there's a huge difference between eligible and competitive. And what's competitive is determined by the panel and changes every year based on the group that comes together, what they value, and what they value as a group, as individuals and as a group. And so we used to require a cash match of 25% of the total budget. So for example, if you were requesting $4,000, then your total project budget should be at least 5,000 and you had 1,000 coming from another source. This is not, and that could be contributed income or earned income. That's not a requirement for this program, but I think it's a good benchmark to think about making your program your application a bit more competitive. it's always good to show additional funding coming in either through potential earned income or contributed income. Not required, sometimes not valued by panels, sometimes highly valued by panels. It really depends on the group. Mediums, all expressive artistic disciplines are eligible, including but not limited to visual, performing, written, digital, traditional, and experimental mediums. I'll also add in literary, just to be super clear. Film, all eligible. Timeline and location, all funded activities must occur between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025 in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. There's a typo here, and I apologize, it's left over, but it'll allow me to really highlight this point. This is what's new for our arts and culture project grants. We are able to fund, it does not need to occur in the same county as the legal applicant. I'm even in front of you now going to adjust this and take it out just to really drive this point home, okay? That doesn't exist for this. Okay, so if you reside in Ulster County and you want to do a project in Dutchess County, that's perfectly fine. This is really new for this program. We've used to have all kinds of workarounds to make projects eligible if they want to do it outside their county of residence. We can fund anything occurring in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, and the applicant just needs to reside either in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. All right, types of eligible projects for the Arts and Culture Project Grant Program: public arts and or cultural events or programs, creation of new work, arts education workshops for closed groups, and any combination of the above. This is also somewhat unique for this program from our previous programs. So for example, say you're a nonprofit organization and you're doing a program where you're working with 5 artists. They're going to create new work, and then you're going to do an exhibition of that work at the end. All of that is eligible within one application. Their fees to create the work, their fees to present the work, marketing expenses. You don't need to segment out expenses for creation of new work separately into a different proposal than requests to present that work. If you're familiar with our statewide community regrants program, there's a big distinction between those two things. That does not exist here. Same thing for individual artists. So say an artist is applying, they're creating new work. They're going to do a series of workshops, with a student group in a public school. And then they're going to do a final presentation of all of that work. That's all in our statewide community regrant program. Those activities would be eligible within 3 distinct categories. In this, it's all just eligible. Okay. So some in-depth details on each of these areas. So for public arts and or cultural events or programs, those must be open to the general public for participation. If it's an exhibition, a performance, a screening, a reading, a festival, open to the general public for participation, meaning not only open for a members only group or students in a school. Really, the only thing that's eligible for closed groups are workshops. And that's, we're going to talk about that in a moment. If, this distinction between workshops comes up a lot. If the workshop is open to the general public, it's considered a public arts and or cultural event or program. As I've said a few times now, types of projects may include exhibitions, workshops, performances, festivals, screenings, virtual programming, and experimental programming for which the central focus is the arts. Okay, other types of eligible projects: creation of new work. Artists may apply for independent or collaborative projects. This is also new for this program. So you're totally eligible if you're a filmmaker and you have a few different roles being filled, and ultimately you're creating a film with a team. Eligible. If you are a visual artist and you're going to be working with a composer to do collaborative work, eligible for both of you to apply together. Artists working in all expressive artistic mediums are encouraged to apply. Projects focused on the creation of new work must include a public component. The scope of the public component is at the discretion of the applicant artist. This is something that has been very present in our other programs, that if you're seeking funding to create new work, there must be some kind of public component, and that does remain the same for this program. So really the reason for this is the funding that we're administering is public taxpayer dollars. And we are really interested, particularly when we're funding artists or collaborative projects in the creation of new work, that the public can see the important role that artists play in our community, can engage with artists, and for that reason, the public component remains. But I really want to highlight that this is, again, at the discretion of the applicant artist. It could be something like you're going to create work alone in your studio, and then you're going to have a gallery exhibition at the end, or you're going to have a small scale exhibition at a public library, or you're writing a new book of poems and you're going to do a reading at the end at a public place. It could also look like you're going to work with community members while you're creating the work, if that's appropriate for your discipline, for your practice. Maybe you're going to interview community members and use the content of those interviews to influence the work that you're creating or be a part of the work that you're creating. Maybe you're writing a play and you're going to do a stage reading with local community members as the actors. And the public component may be in person or virtual. We list here all the different types of potential public engagement. So it could be during the creation of the work. It could be workshops that you're leading that kind of reflect the work that you're doing, or a public presentation of the work created. Many artists are extremely ambitious, and I'm sure we will get some proposals where artists are doing all of these things. It is really up to you, the extent of your public component. There isn't really an expected threshold of like, you should be doing at least this much public engagement. It's really taken on a case-by-case basis in the context of the entire proposal that you're presenting. And different panels, different panelists might value public engagement to higher or lesser degrees. And that's kind of difficult to predict. You know, we tend to get panelists who say, I just want to support artists creating work, and the public component is just really not that important to me personally. Whereas others will say, I really only want to support projects that have a strong public component. We are really interested for this program in taking in a wide variety, making this as, really breaking down some of the barriers of what's held people back from applying before, some of the bureaucratic stuff where this part's eligible, but this part's not. And just see what comes in, see what the community needs funding to support. And I think this is really part of it. With public component, think about it within the context of your proposal, your capacity. And if you want to talk this through, please make an appointment with us. This is a great thing to discuss and figure out what's the appropriate level of public engagement for the rest of your expenses. And I'll say one more thing about this, that different artists and different mediums have such a range of expenses. If you're a painter, you might need all of this, or a photographer, you might need all of this funding for darkroom chemicals and film and printing materials. Or if you're a painter, oil paints and canvas. Whereas if you're a writer, you might not have those, same types of material needs. Also, in terms of timing, the scope of the work that you're going to create, and the content of the work you're going to create, and how that relates to the public component. So it's really a case-by-case basis. It's not one size fits all. And that's why I really encourage you to think about reaching out to us so we can brainstorm it together. Okay. Eligible projects for arts education workshops for closed groups. And I'll point out again, if it's a workshop that is for the general public, anyone can sign up. Anyone within a specific age range, like say you're doing something that is for students under the age of 18, but any student under the age of 18 can sign up. It's not for a closed group anymore. It's for the public. So it's really that first category that we talked about. This is for closed groups, meaning students in a class in a public school, residents of a senior living facilities, members of a community club, members of a 4-H club, a Girl Scout troop, residents at it's a senior living facility. Anything that's like, this is a closed existing group and we want to offer an arts education program for them. The public is not going to be able to access it. This is the category for that. And so Workshops, as I said, only for those occurring in a public school. Only public pre-K through 12 schools are eligible to serve as partner schools for in-school projects. Private, parochial, and home schools are ineligible to serve as partner schools. If a private school is a nonprofit organization and they want to apply for something for a closed group, they are eligible to do so, but it cannot be during the school day. And I would also, it's unlikely to be competitive if it's only eligible to residents of that private school. If it's open to another group, it may be competitive. If you're in that situation, please reach out to us and let's talk about how you can apply if it's a private, parochial, or homeschool. But if it's occurring during the school day, it has to be a pre-K through 12 public school. As I stated before, if the workshops are open to the general public, applicants should only select the public arts and/or cultural events or programs category, and I'll show you how you do that on the application in a bit. Applications for projects occurring in public schools must include a letter of support from the principal of the partner public school on the school's letterhead. And arts learning funds, this program must not replace or appear to replace the role of certified arts teachers in schools. So this is not for example, public schools cannot apply directly to seek funding to supplement their arts education programs. This is to bring in an outside teaching artist to do a project within a public school. Okay, and now I'll talk about, in general, some projects that are ineligible. Projects that result in permanent public art, including murals, sculpture, landscape architecture, anything that would change the value of building or land, meaning is permanently on the wall, permanently installed in the ground, are not eligible for funding. Public art projects, we love to fund public art projects as long as they are temporary. So for example, outdoor mural that's on wood and can be removed, or printed on a banner, or a sculpture or installation that is ultimately movable. Activities that are recreational, therapeutic, rehabilitative, or religious in nature, when the purpose is primarily for rehabilitation, therapy, or worship, are ineligible. As I said before, we can fund projects for which the primary focus is arts and culture. So if the panel, this is really something that then comes down. If you have a concern about this, it's a great thing to reach out to us so we can discuss it. But when panels are looking at this, they're trying to determine, from the way the proposal is written, is this project primarily focused on high quality arts and cultural programming or on providing rehabilitation, therapy, or worship, if those concerns come up. Non-arts activities, including fundraising events for an organization, humanities programs or programs that are primarily academic, stand-up comedy, recreational parades, programs occurring in private homes, and sip and paint events. So those are just some specific types of events that we will not fund. Some of those veer a little bit into, for example, they are viewed as more recreational than focused on arts and culture. Projects that have not confirmed the artists involved or have no detailed method for selecting artists. Artistic merit, and I'll talk about our review criteria in a bit, but artistic merit is a huge part of our review process. And so if the panel doesn't know who the artists involved will be, and there's no clear plan on how the artists will be selected, it's very difficult to determine artistic merit. All right, now I'll talk about eligible applicants. So if you're a nonprofit interested in applying, you must be a nonprofit or 501c3 organization with a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State, and you'll submit proof of nonprofit status. You must have a board of directors or other governing body that meets to determine and review policy, must have a board-approved non-discrimination policy in place and may not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, religious belief, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. I will note with this one, we will not ask for the non-discrimination policy on the application, because if you've applied to us in the past, we likely have it on file and we just hold on to that. If you are applying to us for the first time in several years, or a new applicant to us, we will ask for this document after you submit your application, and it must have been confirmed before you submit it. So please, we take this one very seriously. You must have a board-approved non-discrimination policy in place. Must be an adherence to the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. In the guidelines, you'll find a link for more information on the Nonprofit Revitalization Act. Libraries, private universities, government entities, and tribal organizations are eligible. They're considered nonprofit organizations and are eligible. Okay, if you're an individual, collaboration, collective, or unincorporated group applying, as I said before, I'm sorry. Swapped the slides around, but I will point out here, couple general notes in terms of eligibility. Applicants and grantees of NISCA and other Arts Mid-Hudson funding programs are eligible for this program. And that is something very unique for our funding programs. Typically, if you apply to NISCA or if you received a grant from NISCA, you are ineligible. You are eligible for this program. If you just received funding or applied to Dutchess Partners in the Arts or statewide community regrants program, you are eligible for this program. There's nothing you could have applied to that would make you ineligible for the arts and culture project grants. We'll only accept one application per applicant. And I'll talk about fiscal sponsorship in a minute, but nonprofits can serve as a fiscal sponsor for unlimited additional projects in addition to their direct application. Okay, now I'm going to get back to eligibility for individuals, collaborations, throwing in their collectives, and unincorporated groups. Individual applicants must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission. Unincorporated groups, collaborations, and collectives are eligible, and collaborations, unincorporated groups will select one individual to serve as the legal applicant on the application. Payment will be made to the individual listed as the legal applicant. So even though you're a collaboration, you're a group, we still need to have a contract signed with one person and send them a check. So it's up to you all to determine who is the person that's going to put in the application. If you have questions about this, please reach out to us. But again, it has to be one person that signs the contract. We can't send a check to an unincorporated group or a collective or collaboration of people. Students enrolled in degree programs may apply for projects that are separate from their schoolwork. So this is also new for this program. We haven't allowed this before, but we're interested to see what comes in. If you're a student, you're enrolled in a degree program, you want to do a public program, a workshop series, or create work outside of your schoolwork, you're eligible to apply, but it must be separate from the work that you're doing for your degree program. Applicants must live in and have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. All right, I'm going to talk about fiscal sponsorship now, but take a step back to say, if you are an individual, a collective, a collaboration, unincorporated group, you do not need a fiscal sponsor to apply. You can apply directly on your own. You do not need a nonprofit involved. If you have applied to us previously in the statewide community regrants program, you'll recall the whole concept of getting a community partner. That doesn't exist here. There is no requirement that you work with a nonprofit. However, we know a lot of artists, collaborations, unincorporated groups might prefer working with a fiscal sponsor. And so for that reason, we will accept fiscal sponsorship, but it is totally up to you if you want to go that route. But I'll go over why you might choose that here. So again, individuals, collaborations, unincorporated groups may elect to work with a nonprofit serving as their fiscal sponsor. This option is offered to accommodate a variety of situations, and it's totally up to the discretion of the applicant to choose which option works best for them, applying directly or applying with a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is a nonprofit organization that agrees to extend its nonprofit status to an individual or unincorporated group. The nonprofit fiscal sponsor is the legal applicant, and if awarded a grant, the contract will be executed by the nonprofit fiscal sponsor, who will receive the funds and pass them on to the sponsored individual or unincorporated group. Nonprofits serving as fiscal sponsors must meet all the nonprofit eligibility requirements in these guidelines that apply to nonprofits applying directly. The fiscal sponsor is not required to make a financial contribution to the project. That's a common misconception. And it is the responsibility of the fiscal sponsor to provide the sponsored individual or group with the necessary tax documents regarding earned income should the individual or group be awarded a grant, which is a Form 1099. Applicants may select this option if they do not wish grant funds to be paid to them directly, or if they require greater administrative support from a nonprofit organization. So I'll talk a little bit more about this. If you are a unincorporated group. We select me, Lilia. I'm going to be the person who's receiving the grant, is the legal applicant on the application, and we receive $8,000. That means myself, Lilia, is getting a W-9 form to fill out to receive, and we'll get a 1099 for $8,000 in income given to me. I may not want that. I might not feel equipped to handle that, and instead would like it to go through another conduit, a fiscal sponsor, who the funding will then be paid to them, and they will then pay out. Say, I'm applying for a performance, and I'm not keeping any of that $8,000. All of that $8,000 is going to pay out other artists. So if you don't feel comfortable managing that, I would really recommend going with a fiscal sponsor and identifying a nonprofit organization that can assist you in that capacity, be the legal applicant, take in the funds, sign the contract, and then help make, and another huge benefit, fiscal sponsorship, they may be able to use their tax exempt status to make purchases. So if you want to talk through, should I get a fiscal sponsor or not, that's a great conversation for us to have on a one-on-one technical assistance call. Again, it is totally up to you. But if it seems like it would be a preferable route, given your circumstances, I would highly recommend looking into it and thinking about it sooner rather than later, because the nonprofit has to agree to serve in that capacity. I also want to note here, a common question we get, and one we've been getting already, there are some artists who work with fiscal sponsorship organizations that are outside of our service area. The nonprofit serving as your fiscal sponsor for this project must be incorporated, or I'm sorry, must have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, meaning we can only send the check within our service area, Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. So for example, if their office and they do all their business in New York City, they are not eligible to serve as your fiscal sponsor for this application. Just want to highlight again, if a nonprofit organization is applying directly, you can put in your direct application, request up to $8,000, and you may also serve as a fiscal sponsor for unlimited additional projects. I will say here, we get this question a lot. Am I going to harm my chances of getting a grant if I fiscally sponsor other applicants? I pretty much never see that be the case on our review panels. I should have mentioned this earlier on, but I've been our grants manager for 6 years. I've worked in the grants department for 8 years. I've sat on dozens and dozens of panels. If anything, it's likely to make a panel excited and appreciative that you're supporting another artist or an unincorporated group and being able to do their work. We have over $500,000 to give out for this program. I think we're going to get a lot of applications. It's still going to be a very competitive process, but we have a very well-resourced program, and I would really encourage nonprofits who are thinking about serving as a fiscal sponsor for a group to really, I would be shocked if it actually harms your chance of getting a grant. It just has not been the case historically. If anything, it just shows that you're supporting other artists in the region. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the budget. As I've said a few times, applicants may request $1,000 to $8,000 in increments of $1,000. So no $4,444.44. Please pick an increment of 1,000, 8,000. You'll see on the application, you're going to select from a list, and you're going to select one of those. You can't manually type in the amount. If awarded funding, grantees will receive no less than 70% of their request amount. There is no cash match required. And on the application form, applicants will be required to describe how grant funds will be spent. And it's a table that's embedded in the form. I'll show it to you in a little bit. I'm going to open up the application and show you a thing or two. You are not required to submit a separate budget form. All the budget questions are embedded on the application itself on Submittable. Allowable expenses, these are really our priorities for what we most want to see funding going towards on a budget, and how we'd most like to spend our funds. Number one always is artist fees. This applies to paying artists involved to create work, to present work. And I really want to encourage, if you're an artist applying to create new work, I strongly encourage setting aside some funding for an artist fee for yourself. This will strengthen your proposal. It shows that you're paying yourself for your time to produce the work, which improves the feasibility of your project. We saw this a lot with our most recent cycle, where we saw a lot of artists, due to the lower, that program, thinking about our individual artist commission, which provides $2,500 to create new work. That's a pretty small grant amount, and depending on your medium, your material needs, you may not have any money left over to pay yourself. But when panels saw that, it did raise questions around the feasibility of the project if there's no funding going to support the artists and their time to create work. So if you're an artist, you're applying to create new work, or you're a collaboration applying to create new work, do not shy away from giving yourself an artist fee. Supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project. This is another priority for funding. Supplies and materials to create new work or to execute a presentation of a program. Community outreach, advertising, and marketing efforts. These are the ways that the public will see and hear about the great work that you're doing, the investment we've made in your project and in your work. And so funding to support community outreach and advertising and marketing efforts is a great thing to request funding for. Efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming. These could be things like we need to rent a temporary ramp to make the space ADA compliant. We're going to hire somebody to do some translation services for the event, or ASL interpretation. We're going to rent some hearing devices for those that are hard of hearing, and any other, accessibility need that you've determined is important for the group that you're trying to reach. And then direct administrative expenses and or planning and preparation expenses for the proposed event. I would say this kind of, these are listed a bit in order of highest priority. It's totally eligible to ask for administrative support, but if it's making up the vast majority of a budget, I have seen that be less competitive with panelists. All right, I'm going to run through what is ineligible for this program. And so these are ineligible expenses, meaning they should not appear as a line item on your budget that you are asking us to pay for. Operating expenses of privately owned facilities like homes or studios, acquisitions of works of art. So not paying someone to create new work, but instead, we're going to purchase this for our collection. That's not eligible. Contingency funds, purchase of permanent equipment items or capital improvements are not eligible for this program. Creation of textbook or classroom materials, that very specifically means like we're creating a textbook for this class. Obviously, if you're doing an in-school project and you need materials for the classroom to do your arts education program, that's totally fine. But it's really the creation of textbooks or permanent worksheets for a course that are not eligible. Lobbying expenses are not eligible. Regrants by applicants to fund other activities. This program is already a regrant program on behalf of the New York State Legislature. We cannot fund, for example, you're applying for a program where you're just going to pay out, you're asking for $8,000. You're going to give 8 grants of $1,000 each to other artists. That's not eligible. We're already doing that through this program. This is, to do public programs or create new work or do workshops for closed groups of learners. Also ineligible: awards, trophies, certificates, scholarships, fellowships, contests, competitions, cash prizes, and juror fees. If you're paying an artist to create new work, it's an artist fee to create new work. You're paying them to present, you're paying them to present. It should not be open-ended, like this is a regrant, this is an award, scholarship, a fellowship. It should be really specific to the task that they're doing. We cannot fund fees paid to children under the age of 18. We cannot fund fees paid to board members of the nonprofit applying directly or serving as a fiscal sponsor. This comes up a lot. Please double check if you are applying and, for example, say you're a symphony orchestra and some of your board members are in the orchestra, and you then write on the application, $500 to each orchestra member, or $100 to each orchestra member. Then the panel is going to waste time saying, okay, well, 3 of them are also on the board and they can't actually receive funds. So if, there could be any confusion about whether or not board members are being paid, I think it's always good to be very explicit around that. Entertainment costs, including receptions, food, and fundraising events. We cannot fund food. We cannot fund food. It comes up a lot. Refreshments for the opening, not eligible. You're an artist creating new work, you're doing a series of interviews with community members, and you want to buy them all coffee during the interviews. Writing on your budget, funding for coffee, not eligible, right? I would just encourage you to pay yourself an artist fee that's appropriate to then be able to, pay us, cover some food, or instead say I'm giving a stipend of $50 to each participant in the program, instead of saying specifically we're covering their, I'm paying for food. And then we also cannot fund out-of-state travel costs, and we can only fund travel within New York State. All right. So I've gone through a lot of the eligibility stuff. I'm going to talk about inclusion accessibility and then get into some more details about specifically applying. Okay, I encourage all of you, if you have not done so already, to take a look at our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility statement on our website. But Arts Mid-Hudson strives towards broad inclusion and true access to arts and cultural programming for all. And so we encourage thoughtful outreach to and efforts to see input from all groups in our region, and specific outreach and inclusion efforts to underserved audiences. So what does this mean? These are groups who may have limited access to arts programs, services, or resources due to location, race, economic status, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, disability, or other factors. Some groups underserved by the arts in our region may include Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ+, disabled, elder, youth, rural, and or low-income audiences. And then, of course, there's all the intersections of these groups. And so I want to note here, what we're talking about is, for example, say you're talking about who you're trying to reach through this. You're going to do a performance. You're going to do a series of performances at the library, and you're trying to expand your audience. So you might talk about, this is the general marketing efforts that we're going to do, and then expand that to talk about these are some specific outreach and marketing efforts that are targeted towards specific groups that we're trying to reach. We're going to reach rural audiences by doing XYZ. We've engaged rural audiences by putting out a community survey in our region and asking them, what are you interested in seeing at the library? Not just determining, for them without any input from those groups. These are things that are going to really strengthen your proposal, being able to pinpoint a specific outreach method or way that you've fostered engagement with that specific group and feedback from them in terms of what they want to see and what type of programming is important to them. When we're talking about this program, you see I'm using underrepresented, underserved, marginalized groups. These are catch-all terms that may be less useful to you on your actual application. I think it's much better to be specific and realistic about, we're really trying to reach Spanish-speaking individuals in Pauling through this project. And so in order to reach those individuals, we're going to do X, Y, Z. That's a lot more impactful than saying we welcome everyone and we're trying to reach as many underserved and marginalized populations as possible. Being specific about specific groups is a lot more successful, realistic, and thoughtful. And so, for example, if it's very easy to say, we want to engage Spanish-speaking residents in Dutchess County. What's stronger is saying, we're trying to reach Spanish-speaking individuals in Dutchess County. We've hired this person to translate our materials. We have engaged with these specific groups to get feedback about what programming is relevant to the population we're trying to serve. These are the accommodations we're making on the day of to help ensure that we're going to, get this turnout that we're hoping to have. Or we have offered discounted tickets to these community groups, whatever it might be. Those specifics will go a lot further than a generalized statement. And have the impact you're hoping for beyond looking good on the application. I think panels, can kind of get hung up on that if they read something that they feel like is just for the benefit of the application and not a really thoughtful, ingrained way that the organization is working, or, thoughtful way that the artist or collective is trying to expand their audience. Priority, talk a little bit about accessibility. Priority will be given to activities that take place in locations that are fully compliant with the American Disabilities Act. And we really encourage you to consider accessibility before the event, during the event, and after. There is an Americans Disability Hotline with the phone number listed there, 1-800-514-0301. And so if you are looking for more information or resources on ADA, you can reach out to us and we can send those your way. We have funded programs that are taking place in locations that are not fully ADA compliant, because we know many of our arts and cultural sites are historic buildings, and there are certain restrictions that they're under in terms of the changes they can make. We encourage you to think about any ways you can expand accessibility through our funding. So accessibility means planning to ensure individual disabilities may fully participate. Resources for blind, deaf, or hard of hearing individuals, translation services, free or pay what you can programs. I'll talk about this a little bit here. Projects do not need to be free to be eligible for this program, but if the ticket price, participation fee seems to present a high barrier for entry, it will seriously impact the competitiveness of your proposal. I see that happened around, depending on the panel, depending on the context of the project, over $25 ticket price is when questions start popping up, unless of course it's like this is a theatrical production or a symphony, production, or a symphony performance where there are so many artists involved that need to get paid. That really makes sense why that fee is a bit higher. Given the scope of the project, even $15 may appear to be too high to a panelist. That being said, if you have a ticket price and you have a really robust pay what you can program, no one turned away, sliding scale, and that's really clearly detailed in the proposal, that will really go a long way towards making a panel feel more comfortable with ticket fees, ticket prices. So I really encourage you to think about that. You'll see some help text on the application that guides you when we ask about ticket prices. And what's important to that is, how is the sliding scale pay what you can process structured, and how is it presented to the public? Does a community member need to show up on the day of the event to find out that it could have been pay what you can? Because if that's the case, they just probably won't go if they don't think they can afford it. So it's really important to note, this is on all of our marketing materials. When people buy a ticket on our website, they can select these options, whatever it might be. Transportation assistance, childcare, in-person or virtual consideration, and the outreach you're doing. These are all a part of accessibility. So there's lots of components to this. Another great thing to talk about us in a one-on-one meeting. All right, now I'll talk about our review process and reiterate what I've said a couple times before already, which is that all submitted grant proposals are reviewed using a peer panel evaluation process. Panelists include artists, arts workers, and community members who evaluate grant proposals and recommend a level of funding. There are new and returning panelists every year to all of our programs. I will say we are likely to have some returning panelists from other grants programs, but of course, this is our first year. Every panelist on this will be a new panelist for this program. Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board do not have a vote in this process. Panelists have access to information on previously funded projects. Prior grant funding does not guarantee continued support. And so this really applies to our other grants programs. If you have a track record with us, if you've been funded before, panelists might ask, have you funded this? Have you worked with them before? And we'll share, your successes from previous years. Just because you have received grant support through other programs does not guarantee that you'll receive a grant through the Arts and Culture Project Grant Program. If you're interested in serving as a panelist, or someone who would make a great panelist, we have a panelist nomination form linked here and also on our website. I will say though, if you're planning to apply, we're not going to tap you to be a panelist on this program. So really, if you want to throw your name in there for a future program, please do so. All right, and now I will talk about our evaluation criteria. This is in our guidelines, and this is literally the rubric that the panel will use when reviewing applications. We have 3 review criteria: artistic merit, project feasibility, and the impact of the project. Each of these, they can award up from 1 to 4 points. 1 is the lowest score, 4 is the highest score. And they can award 1 bonus point if they feel the project is exemplary in any of the above criteria or in meeting the overall goals for the program. So the highest score you can receive is a 13. The lowest score you can meaning you received a 4 in each of the review criteria and a bonus point. The lowest score you can receive is a 3, meaning you received a 1 in each of the review criteria and no bonus point. in depth on each of these review criteria. Artistic merit, so this is taking into consideration the project's design, the proposed artists involved, and the audience experience, and any of the artist organization's track record or past activities. Project feasibility, and I'll just take a step back to say artistic merit is super subjective to individual panels, to who happens to come together as a group and what they value. This is why our panels change every year. It's very important to us that they change every year. And I often see myself, think during panels, wow, I'm thrilled that this panel loves this artist's proposal because previous panels have not really gone for this or appreciated this artist's work. Or I think, oh, I can't believe they're going for this. Last year's panel would have never gone for this, whatever it might be. And so it really changes every year. Project feasibility, next review criteria. The project has clearly defined activities which appear feasible and achievable. The project demonstrates the ability to successfully complete the project. This all means the timeline makes sense, the budget makes sense, the key players involved have the capabilities as evidenced through the proposal to see out the project. It seems likely to occur in the way that's described in the proposal. And the impact of the project. Project is likely to make a positive impact on the arts and cultural scene in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties. The degree to which the project directly benefits artists and includes underserved audiences and underrepresented artists and or arts and cultural workers might create a new program, foster an emerging artistic discipline, or create increased opportunities for artists and the public to engage with arts and culture in our region. So really, impact from all sides, impact on the applicant artist or applicant organization, impact on the public, impact on the artist to be paid as a result of doing the project. And, potential, is this a project that, this corner of Ulster County has very little access to theater programming. And so if by funding this is going to foster an artistic discipline that doesn't have enough, isn't seen enough in this part of our region, as an example. Some reporting requirements if you are funded, so that you're aware when applying. You will be asked to submit an interim report, a final report. The interim report is really just a paragraph telling us how the project is going and letting us know of any questions you have. Final report is more in depth. We'll ask some specifics around numbers served, what the impact was, any kind of economic impacts you saw. You'll get access to the interim and final report when you receive your check. And so while you're doing your project, you'll be able to plan and prepare yourself to be able to fulfill the reporting requirements. If any questions, if you become a grantee and you have questions about reporting, this is something we work very closely with our grantees on if they have any questions. You'll be asked if there are any major changes to the project to please let us know as soon as possible. And I just want to impress upon everyone that we are highly flexible, maybe more flexible than most grant makers, in that we are happy. We understand that, especially for artists creating new work, you might write the proposal is your proposal of what you intend to do. When you start working, you might realize, oh, I was going to do this whole thing in this medium with this material, but it's not really working that great. And I've identified a different material that's going to work a lot better. That's totally at the artist's discretion to then make that change. Or to say, I said I was going to do it on this date, but things have changed. It seems like it's going to be a lot more successful if I push it out a month. And so we're going to do it in April instead of March. That's totally fine. It's just about letting us know of any major changes as they come up. The most major changes are changes to the key artists involved, or the dates, location, or who's going to be served by it. Those are things that are really important. If it's things like I'm changing my material a bit, you don't need to consult with us on that. We trust the artist's discretion. Some more responsibilities of grantees, just to be crystal clear about what happens if you become a grantee. If an applicant is awarded funds, they will sign a contract with Arts Mid-Hudson agreeing to execute the project as described in their proposal. Additionally, individuals will complete a W-9 so that we can make a payment to them, and will receive a 1099 for 2024. The check will be sent in one payment. We cannot send it like split over time. We can only send it as one payment. Grantees are required to complete an interim report, final report, as we talked about. Grantees are required to properly credit the New York State Legislature and Arts Mid-Hudson for supporting the project. we will supply the funding credit details upon funding notification. So if you receive a grant, you'll get an additional document that says this is how you credit us in printed materials. All right. I'm going to talk a bit about submitting a grant proposal. Reminder again, all grant proposals must be submitted online by Thursday, August 1st, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. So basically it's going to close right before it becomes August 2nd. Just a general note in terms of technical assistance and for all of you working, we are totally sympathetic and understanding that sometimes life requires you to work at the last minute. We will never turn you away from draft review or from answering your questions. We're answering questions up until end of business on the day of the deadline. You know, I'm even checking email that evening. You know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but if somebody comes in with a major issue, I'm going to respond to them as best I can. Of course, if we're inundated with requests, we're going to get to them in the order that they're received. So it's more a matter of like, we will make every effort to help you, but we might literally not have time if a lot of other people are working last minute. All that being said, I strongly recommend not waiting until Thursday, August 1st to submit. I know from previous years, 50% of our applications will come in on August 1st. They always do, and there's no shame in that. But technical issues can come up. You can think all of your attachments were going to upload just fine, and now they're giving you trouble. Submittable is doing work on the website on that day, and none of us could have predicted that. And now they're creating issues for all of us. There's a major weather event and power goes out in your region. We don't know. I really recommend doing this as early as possible, as you can, but at least trying to submit the day before so that if there's technical issues, we have August 1st during business time to help you sort them out. If you require any assistance in completing the online application form, please contact us in advance of the deadline, and we will be happy to support you and identify what services we can provide to make sure that you can apply. I am going to open up the application form really quickly. You can see this still, Vanessa? Cool. Just to show you how this is going to work. This will be a link from maybe I'll take a step back and go to our website and show you how to find this stuff. It's our website, artsmidhudson.org. Under grants and artist opportunities, and then under grants and funding, you'll see the first one listed, Arts and Culture Project Grant Program, with the beautiful logo our marketing coordinator, Kristen, made. And you'll click on Learn More. This is where you'll find all the information about the grant, including a link to the guidelines, link to the application. If you're doing fiscal sponsorship and you want the letter of agreement that you'll submit, you can find that here. This is also that list of Q&A sessions I talked about and the link to RSVP to them, and a link to make a one-on-one appointment with Arts Mid-Hudson. Clicking on the application, this will bring you to Submittable. Please keep in mind, we are using Submittable. We are paying members of Submittable. We don't have access to your account with Submittable. We are using the service just like you are. However, we're using it as a grant maker. So our account is a bit different, but I just want you to keep that in mind that we don't have, although this looks like our website as soon as you get here, this lives on Submittable. And if there are any major technical issues you're having with Submittable, I recommend reaching out. You can shoot a question to us, but also sending that same question to Submittable technical support, especially if it's something like, I can't log into my account. We will not be able to help you there. You'll have to reset your password with Submittable. If you aren't logged in, it's going to prompt you to either create a new account or sign in. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just sign in, not live. Okay. Thank you. So now when you come back, Vanessa, you can see it, right? Thank you. And so you're going to see everything listed here, some basic information, a link to the guidelines, link to make an appointment with us, our email. It's always going to ask you to confirm your address. This is kind of new with Submittable. I'm not sure what the deal is with it, but it'll remember it once you put it in once, and just click Save Address and Continue. And then you're going to see the rest of the application. I'm going to run through this. I'm not going to go through the entire application right now. This is something if you want to attend a future Q&A session, you have a question about a specific part of the application, happy to share my screen. We can run through it more in depth. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to go through some things I really want to draw your attention to. The first, the applicant of record. You'll see there's a lot of help text here because people mess this up. If you're a nonprofit applying, you're entering in the name of the nonprofit, not the individual completing the form. Not my name is Lilia Perez. I'm submitting on behalf of Arts Mid-Hudson. I write Arts Mid-Hudson here if I'm applying. Of course, I don't because we're not applying, we're administering the program. But anyway, you'll write in the name of the nonprofit. If you're an individual applying or you're an individual representing a collaboration or an unincorporated group, you write the name of the individual here, not the name of the unincorporated group, not two names, the name of the legal applicant. If you are being fiscally sponsored, the legal applicant is the nonprofit that's fiscally sponsoring you. So you enter in the name of the nonprofit. I know it seems weird that you have to get in the weeds like this and figure out exactly how you are and whose name to enter in, but this is immensely helpful for us to just see a list of who are all the legal applicants. So please read all of the help text on the guidelines in the application carefully, but especially here, be careful about who you are entering in because that is the legal applicant of record. You'll indicate if it's a nonprofit applying or an individual applying or applying with a fiscal sponsor. Either of those you select. Anytime you see a question here that is and/or, you can pick one or the other. I recommend just going in and filling those in because they may reveal additional questions. This definitely reveals additional questions. You don't see it right away, but once you select if you're a nonprofit or if you're an individual, the application responds to that and will show you the appropriate questions for if you're a nonprofit or if you're an individual. If you leave this blank and start doing the whole application and then try to submit, it's going to kick you back and say, select this, and that's going to show you a whole bunch more questions. So I really recommend selecting, filling these in right away, especially because then you'll see the scope of the entire application. I want to draw your attention here to type of project. So this is kind of the breakdown I did earlier on. Creation of new work, public arts and or cultural event program, or workshop for a closed group. This is a checklist, meaning you will check all that apply. So if you're doing, you're creating new work and you're going to do a public presentation of that work, you're selecting both of these, right? If you're doing a workshop series that's open to the general public and anyone can sign up for it, you're only selecting this one. If you are doing a workshop series that's for a classroom in a K through 12 or pre-K through 12 public school, you're only selecting this one. If you're an individual artist and you're creating new work and then going into a school to do some workshops and then you're going to do a final presentation, you're selecting all of them. This is a really key one because this does reveal additional questions. There are not too many of them. It's just a couple more for us to get some clarifying details related to what you're doing. I'm going to leave them all checked off just so I can point them out as I go. You'll give your project a title. You'll describe your grant request in one sentence. This is very helpful to us for administrative purposes. It does not need to be lengthy. Again, it's just a summary of what you're doing. The project description is really a key question that asks you to describe the scope of the work that you will do. This is something that we help a lot with in draft review if you want help here. I really recommend, though, before diving into answering this question, you might want to look at all of the questions that will follow it because there will be places where we ask for specific details and you might want to use your word count there instead of here, for example. It might be helpful to answer this talking about the different phases of the project. And so if you're checking off all three up here, you should be covering the scope of all of this within your project description. Now, I just want to show you an example. I have creation of new work checked off right now. And you'll see the next question is summarize the new work you will create. If I don't have this checked, that question is gone, right? So it's only revealed when I check off creation of new work, summarize the new work you will create. This is just briefly saying, I will create 10 paintings. I will write a new play about blah, blah, blah. You're going to go more in depth talking about the new work you're going to create in the project description. Here is just for you to say, this is the work, this is the scope of what I'm creating. It will also ask you here, summarize the public component for the project. If you're creating new work, tell us what is the public component. This is just to make sure if you left it out of the project description, we get some clarity on what the public component is if you're creating new work. Again, this next question, where is the workshop for the closed group taking place? If we click off workshop for closed group in this type of project section, that question isn't here anymore. So just, so you understand the importance of this question right here. I want to scroll through to see if there is anything else I really want to highlight. This question comes up all the time: estimate number of participants / audience. This is an estimate number of everyone involved, artists involved, audience members involved, who are the total number of people that will benefit. And so it's your best estimate. You may not know exactly the amount. When you do your final report to us, it might be a different number than what you enter in here, and that's totally fine. You're just giving your best estimate so we understand the scope of what you're trying to do. I'm just going to keep scrolling to see if any pop out to me. Here, this question. Is this program free to the general public? You say yes, right? You say no, it reveals an additional question. What are the ticket prices or participation fees, right? It's not going to ask you if it's all free. But if it's free, if it's not free, then we're going to ask you to expand on that. And there's an additional information section for you to talk about. This is our sliding scale. This is how we're going to market that sliding scale or pay what you can program. Okay. Budget section. Again, this is where you will select how much money you are requesting from us. You can only select one of these, right? Increments of $1,000 up to $8,000. This is where you'll enter in the total project expenses for your project. So say you're requesting $8,000, it's going to cost you $8,000 to do the project. You enter in $8,000 here, you select $8,000 below. Let's say your project's going to cost you $10,000, but you're only requesting $8,000 from us. This is the difference that you'll show us, that, the whole project's going to cost you $10,000. You have $2,000 coming from some other source, and $8,000 is coming from the grant. This here is a table showing us only how you will spend grant funds. It's not, so for example, if your total project is going to cost you $10,000, you're not showing us how you're spending $10,000 here. You're showing us how you're spending $8,000, if that's what you're requesting. It's very important here to enter in the expense with no symbols, because we have a total section at the bottom. So say you requested $8,000. Let's say you're applying for administrative support. In the explanation column, we're going to say support for staff executing the project, artist fees. The rest is going to be for artist fees. So we're going to say 7 artists at $1,000 each. As an example, $7,000 is the expense. And then you see down below, it will total $8,000. What you're looking for is that this number matches whatever you have selected up here. If you write in here $6,999, right, it's going to total to reflect that, and it's just going to not look great to the panel that this doesn't all line up. So you want this to all line up. Now I'm going to show you, we'll see if the example works here. Submittable doesn't tend to like symbols. So if I wrote 7,000, with a dollar sign and with a comma, see, now it's only showing a total of $1,000. So please note that there's help text here to remind you, do not enter in any symbols, just the numeric value. Okay. There's a follow-up question: how grant funds will be spent. This is our last attempt to get that information if you have left the explanation column blank. So if you feel like you've really used the explanation column, you've been clear about how you're expending grant funds, all you need to do down here is maybe copy and paste it, reiterate it, summarize it. You could also kind of think of this as a budget note section if you want to expand a little bit on some of these expenses. But it's basically our way of ensuring that if we got something like this from you, we know we have some way of determining what this means. Okay. And then our final budget question: how will you pay for expenses not covered by your grant request for this program? Jumping up to our example before, I'm going to go back. Say we had $8,000. For the total project expense is $8,000. We're requesting $8,000. We have no additional funding coming into this project. I might enter in NA here, and that would be fine. Now, say I have, or if you're, your project could cost you $8,000, you're requesting $8,000, but you've also applied to some other grants. You might say, we've also sought funding from some other grants that would grow our project budget. We can still do it for 8,000 without the funding. And it's also maybe a backup plan in case we don't get this grant. That might be a good thing to show the panel. Now, say you're, again, our example of the total project's going to cost you $10,000. You're requesting $8,000 from us. You've said here, I know I took out the explanation column, but we had 1,000 going to admin, 7,000 going to artist fees. And in how will you pay for expenses not covered by your grant request from your program, you might summarize to say, additional expenses include 2,000 in marketing and promotion expenses. We're covering this by earned income from ticket sales on the day of the event, or we requested $2,000 from our local community foundation, or we got $500 donated from Stewart's, whatever it might be. Put that in here to show us what is the expense that is not, you're not asking us to cover, and how are you going to pay for it? Okay. And I think I just want to note here, we also asked a follow-up question. What is the marketing and promotion plan to reach your intended audience? We think I really encourage you to read the help text here, but we encourage you to identify who you're trying to reach and directly connect that to the marketing and promotion that you're going to do to reach those specific groups. There are several attachments, like if you want to attach primary artist resume or bios, this is optional, but you can attach them here. There's a place to upload work samples. Work samples are required. If you have additional supplemental materials like letters of support, examples of marketing materials, video documentation of previous events, you can upload those under additional supplemental materials. I'm going to skim over this just to see. I think that'll be about it. And then you'll see there's, final questions about who you are, who's the applicant, and so forth. I had it, and all right. Okay, so that's a little bit about the application. Just giving you some clarity on attachments. If you're a nonprofit applying, you'll need to include a staff list indicating if individuals are paid staff or volunteers, and just listing who's on your staff. A board list including board name of board members and their details. If you're a town or city applying directly, that wouldn't apply. You don't need to submit a board list, just as a note. Financial statement showing both income and expenses for the applicant's most recent fiscal year. Same thing. If you're a town or city applying, you don't need to submit a financial statement for the entire town. And proof of nonprofit status. You can look at the guidelines to see acceptable proofs of nonprofit status. For an individual applying directly or applying with applying directly or with a fiscal sponsor, that should say, excuse me, which I will just here just in case anyone's looking at this and is unclear. Proof of residency. Applicants must provide proof of residency, which contains the individual's name and address. Documentation must be dated no later than 2023, meaning there should be a date on that document, 2023 or in 2024. If you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, the same documents that nonprofits need to apply with, need to submit, you'll need to submit as well. So a staff list for the fiscal sponsor, board list for the fiscal sponsor, financial statement, proof of nonprofit status, and a letter of agreement. As I showed you on our website, we have a template for that letter of agreement that you can submit. As I point out on the application, we accept work samples and additional supplemental materials. Those will be uploaded on Submittable. We do not recommend providing a list of links. If you want the panel to look at your work sample, it must be uploaded to the application itself. We'll accept image files, video, audio, literary samples, and acceptable file types are JPEGs, MP4, WAV, MP3, and PDF. For example, we don't accept TIFF files. We don't accept Word docs. We don't accept MOV files, which is a QuickTime Apple only file that can give us a little bit of technical difficulty. So we don't accept those anymore. If you're having trouble converting your file to a different acceptable file type, just reach out to us and we're happy to help you with that. And as I said, additional supplementals could include letters of support, press articles, marketing samples, video documentation of previous events, whatever you see fit. Couple quick tips for the budget. I'm kind of getting into my final tips here, and then we'll wrap up this info session. So I really encourage you to work on your narrative and your budget together and to check for consistency. This is something that comes up a lot. So say in your narrative, in your project description, you talked about how you're going to, or you've said in total number of participants that you're going to serve 100 audience members. But then on your, how you're saying additional funding that you're going to get towards the project, you say something like, we're going to sell 50 tickets. That is the kind of discrepancy that can confuse a panel. Or if while you're working, you started off saying that you were going to pay the artist $1,000 each, and then you realize you're actually going to pay them $1,500 each. And I would just then do a search on your application to make sure you made that change everywhere. Because if there's a discrepancy somewhere, it just draws the attention of a panel, and then they waste time thinking about which is the accurate number. I really recommend doing the budget first if you can, because it's a map at what you're doing. It's the focus of your proposal, how you're going to spend funds, what you need the funding for. That shouldn't come as a surprise once the panel gets to see that table that's embedded on our application. So I really recommend thinking about doing the budget early on and then having that guide your writing for the rest of the proposal. Of course, use the explanation column. You can be as detailed as you'd like in there, or use that section below to provide additional details where it asks how will grant funds be spent. Check our guidelines for allowable and ineligible expenses. Check it multiple times. When I'm writing grants, I always like to, I read the guidelines. I write down all the stuff that really sticks out to me and try to apply that to my grant writing. And then as I'm working, I continue to go back and look at the guidelines. I continue, right before I submit, I do one last look at the guidelines to make sure I didn't miss anything. So, there's a lot of information that I'm providing to you today and is in our guidelines. So it's always good to make sure, go back, double check that you absorbed all of it and you're not putting a line item on there that is an ineligible expense. A helpful formula if your project budget is larger than your grant request amount is your expenses minus your projected income equal your grant request amount, potentially. So say, you have $10,000 in expenses, but you're projecting that you're going to have $2,000 in contributed income or earned income, then, what's left? $8,000 is what you should be requesting from us. If you put in the budget or put in your application that, you're going to sell your total project expenses are $10,000. You're requesting $8,000 from us, but you're anticipating that you're going to make $5,000 in ticket sales. The panel's going to question, this doesn't all balance out. Where's the additional funding going towards? And it's just a matter maybe of being clear around where that additional funding is going and then making your budget bigger. And then, of course, please ask us to review a draft of your budget. We can review a draft in minutes. It's much quicker for us than reading a draft review and giving feedback on writing. Don't hesitate to drop a budget into our email to get some feedback. All right, my final grant writing tips, and then we will wrap up. Highlighting again, this is a brand new program. You're going to hear me say this on our one-on-one calls, and I apologize in advance, but there's a lot we don't know yet about what's going to really go over well for the panel, what's going to be successful. I have the benefit, and Vanessa has the benefit of seeing other grant proposals which have been successful, listening in on panel meetings, but we're always surprised by panel deliberations, and it really is about that group that happens to come together. Of course, a group of people that none of which apply to this program. And what they value as individuals and collectively as a group. And also, the applicant pool itself, what comes in and the competitiveness that the competitiveness of your proposal in the scope of the applicant pool. One thing that I really think is a great part of our process is we review every single application with the panel. They read all of them. We discuss every application. And based on the conversations, their scores and their votes might change. And so for this program, I think that's going to be really important to the process, the discussion, them figuring out what's important to them. And I think we're going to be able to fund a lot of really great projects that way. Strongly recommend answering the questions directly and succinctly. They're going to be reading a lot of proposals. Just now for our statewide community regrants program, we received over 200 applications, which was an all-time high for that program. And for this program, and for that program, applicants who applied directly to NISCA were not eligible. So that's like maybe 100 additional applicants who did not apply to us just simply because they were not eligible and may have. I think a lot of those applicants are going to come in for this project, for this program as well. And so panels are going to be reading a lot of applications, a lot of information, and you want to get right to the point as quickly as possible, be direct, be succinct. Vanessa and I can really help you there. We've gotten very good over the years at reading, writing, and then reorganizing it to ensure that the most important information is first. That's something I really like to focus on in my draft review sessions. And not only comes first and it comes in a logical, hierarchical, chronological order, but also that it's clear and direct. Provide specifics to understand the scope of the project and the depth of planning. So you don't want to be succinct at the detriment of showing the specifics and scope and planning that you're doing. So you still want to provide specifics, but you want to be really clear and organized in the way that you present them. I always say to applicants, you want to write for someone who knows nothing about you or the project. It's never a good idea to make assumptions about what the panel knows about you, about your artistic practice, about your track record as an organization or as a group. You want to write as if the person on the other end reading knows nothing about you. Because in all, I can pretty much 100% guarantee there will be at least one panelist sitting there who is not familiar. Even if you're a major organization or region, there will likely be somebody there who says, I've heard of them, but I've never been to one of their programs, or, I haven't heard of them at all. You want that panelist to have a similar experience to somebody who's a huge advocate for you and loves your programming and loves your artistic practice, right? So you want to make sure it's clear. You're not leaving out the key details, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your project. And this is something that really comes with getting outside feedback. When I'm writing a grant, I always seek outside feedback because I make assumptions when I'm writing. It's easy when you're writing, especially first drafts of a grant proposal, to skim over stuff that's really obvious to the writer. And an outside person can read that and say, you never said where it's going to take place. You never said how you're going to market the sliding scale. And it might be obvious to you, well, like, of course we're going to market it. We're going to do X, Y, Z. You have to tell them and not make the assumption that they know on the panel. I think it's always a good idea to reference the goals and priorities of the funding program to which you're applying. I referenced this early on. When I'm writing a grant proposal, the first thing I do is I either print out the guidelines or any printed materials they've given me. I highlight, I write notes, and I just write down phrases that I think connect what I'm trying to do to what the program is trying to achieve. And then give that language back in your writing. The panel is going to read the guidelines as well in order to prepare themselves to review your proposal. So when they see that language echoed back to them, it's going to help them feel more confident that you're aware of what the program is trying to achieve, and you are trying to align your work and goals with the goals of this program. And then finally, control the review discussion. I just want to highlight this point. It kind of encompasses a lot of what I just talked about: distractions, assumptions about what the panel doesn't know, discrepancies of information. It distracts panels. Panels are groups of people. They're prone to, instead of, for example, if they see it says you're paying an artist $1,000 in one place, and then another place it says you're paying them $1,500, the panel conversation is going to come to a grinding halt. And now everybody's going to go back and forth, looking through the application, using Control F to find information and try to figure out what is the accurate number. That is wasted time where they're not talking about what they really like about your proposal, and they're focusing on trying to solve a mystery and do detective work. So controlling the review discussion is all about presenting clear, direct, chronological, and accurate information. And getting outside feedback from Arts Mid-Hudson staff, from trusted colleagues or friends, is a great way to get closer to that. And I would even say, too, if you're an applicant who has applied to us now, and maybe I've been working with you personally for 8 years, I think it would be a great year to get feedback from Vanessa, because I might be making assumptions when I'm reading because I know you and doing the same thing that you might be doing yourself. So I really encourage you to think about that. Okay. All right. And first steps to get started, and then we'll wrap up. If you think you will need a fiscal sponsor or a partner public school, that's the first thing to work on. If you're trying to find a public partner school, I really recommend connecting with a teacher. that you're trying to maybe work within their classroom and help leaning on them for some assistance in terms of getting this approved through the school. I recommend reviewing the online application form and guidelines, especially clicking off any questions that, either a checklist or what's called a radio list where you can select one or the other, so that you see the full scope of the application you'll need to fill out. As I said, I recommend working on the budget first. Organize digital copies of all the required attachments and work samples. This is a nightmare to have to do on the day of the deadline. So if you're getting started, just start grabbing those documents and just upload them and have it be over with and all happy with submittable, so that you can focus on your writing. Because especially for like your proof of residency, your proof of nonprofit status, your financial statement, that stuff isn't going to change while you're writing. Work samples, you might want to make sure your narrative and your work samples really connect. That's very important. And that's something maybe we didn't touch on today that I could talk a bit more about in Q&A session, especially for those creating new work. The relationship between what you're trying to do and the work samples you're presenting is really important. But yeah, anyway, getting that stuff on submittable as early as you can is just going to save you a headache later on. And at any time, please make an appointment with Arts Mid-Hudson for support. We love doing these calls. It's fun for us. You're not burdening us in any way. There's no need to preface your email like, I'm sorry, I've reached out so many times. I have another question. We are happy to talk to you and answer any questions you have. I'll highlight that I have a background in photography. I've been working in our grants department for 8 years, providing assistance to all artistic mediums. Vanessa has a really wonderful focus in the performing arts and provide a lot of great support in those areas, especially theater and marketing. So please reach out to us for support. All right. Again, I have been Lilia Perez. I am the grants manager at Arts Mid-Hudson. You can reach me and Vanessa Capuccio-Bear, grants associate at grants@artsmidhudson.org. And you can reach us by phone, 845-454-3222, extension 11. I will say email is always a better way to get in touch with us. We're a lot quicker with email. So if you're capable and able to send it as an email, you'll reach us faster than leaving a voicemail. You might call our office. Sometimes we'll just be able to pick up the phone, but quite often we're on the phone with somebody who's made a pre-scheduled appointment. So that's why sending us an email, making an appointment yourself is a great way to get in touch with us. I thank you so much for listening in on all of this information. I know it was a lot to get through. I hope it was helpful to you. I encourage you to apply. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much for your interest in this program.